great. Well, another round of applause for our speakers. That's really great. I think it was a really great order to have that. Thank you so much for everything that you've said. So we want to take some time. I'm going to get everyone out of here by 8, I promise. So maybe just for the next 10, 15 minutes or so for questions. And hopefully, if you all feel that you can answer all of them, that'd be great. So Amy's actually going to run and fill the mic. Do you want to fill the mic, or sure? Or do you want to actually just take it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. And we'll have time for announcements at the end. So.
Thanks. A couple of questions for Don Tuminaro about the ILO decision. First, I'm assuming that the United States government did not compensate the TWU members or leadership, and also that there were no sanctions against the United States government that the ILO is able to impose. So the first question is, am I right in those assumptions? Second question is there something like a one-page fact sheet or information sheet that can be used to tell people real quickly, briefly, about that ILO decision, given that there was no press about it, etc.? Members of a local or folks that you want to inform about it.
I'm just going to say we're going to take a bunch of questions, and then, so if there's any thematic questions or repeats, you guys don't have to answer them twice. I also want to say we will be using progressive stacks. So if there are folks who are more marginalized, people of color, women, disabled folks, will be bumped up. And you can keep your hand up while other people are asking questions, so I can keep my eyes out for folks. But if people raise their hands before, I don't know who you are. So raise your hands again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, also I have a question for Don. My brother is a public service union member in Ohio where it's been a very fraught fight for people working in public service unions in Ohio to retain the right to collectively bargain. And I found one thing that was interesting about it, outside the question of the law, is the rhetoric that's being used to attack that right. So from the Tea Party perspective, for example, it really has to do with this idea that taxpayers have a right to have the government be more responsive to their desires. So whereas in a private sector, the profitability of a for-profit business becomes part of the negotiation, when it comes to the government, where it's already running a deficit that's become a political issue, the idea that a small segment of the population in the union basically are demanding that the rest of the population go further into debt to meet their demands becomes part of the rhetoric that undermines their ability to bargain. So I just thought that it would be something I've puzzled over, and I have yet to formulate a really succinct way of addressing that question.
Would one of you go into some details about Taft-Hartley so I can sound smart tomorrow at work?
I think this question is really for Daniel. I'm interested in starting a union at my workplace, and I work in a nonprofit, and I think it's very difficult to do it there. So if you had any ideas about resources.
This will be the last question, then you guys can say something else.
Hi, we work at Kaplan International Centers, and we're going to have our union election June 7th, so we're all kind of anxious and excited for that. But one of the things when we're organizing with Guild of New York, and I've always had this conception of unions, and I think this was a theme that was brought up also by kind of all three speakers, of being these like very bureaucratic, kind of top-heavy institutions. And I think one of the things that Occupy, or one of the aspects of the message of Occupy is like, look, a lot of the quote-unquote institutions that we've relied on for so long are kind of becoming irrelevant to our lives on a daily basis, but also like that we need to move away. from relying on large institutions to, like as you said, do it for me or do the work for us. And I'm interested in what you think, or maybe some suggestions that you have about how to push this union that we're organizing with to innovate in those ways. Like, how do you get these very, these institutions that have been doing this for a long time, and they have sort of a set way of going about how they accomplish their goals. And like I always say, we're somewhere between a factory worker and a teacher, and really we're kind of like this new breed of employees that are seeking their rights. Like the types of exploitation that we suffer are very different from what was going on in the 20s and the 30s on factory floors. It's just as horrible, right? But they kind of have a different way of approaching it. So my question is, how do we push these big institutions to innovate and to stay on top of things in that way?